Hello, this is a Richard Lipp grand piano, 176 centimetres long, made in about 1920 and just come into stock. This is a typical Art Deco style of the Richard Lipp of this period. Very tasteful, I believe, and there's the logo of Richard Lipp, which is on this age of piano too. It's got very good ivory keys and in perfect condition. This is an assessment to see what sort of work we need to do on the piano, and the top lid here has been held back. This front part has been back here, and as you can see there's a fade line as a result. If you have a grand piano, then it's a good idea to keep it closed, sometimes open, and then you don't get such a fade line. Though ideally you don't want the sunlight to get to it, or this may not be sunlight, it may just be very strong light, but that's what happens. But there's a very good rosewood wood underneath, so we'd very much like to repolish this. Now the piano's been well restored. There's a date of 1993 for the restoration, and not been used excessively since then, as we'll see, but there's a need for a lot of regulation to be done. The soundboard has been reconditioned as well, and the frame's been refinished, so generally very good condition, very good quality work, and you can see the new bass strings there as well. Now these are very high quality strings, very rich bass, which you should get on a Richard Lipp, and just very even tone. And I want to show you something now. One of the signs of a very high quality piano is whether they can match the break point. That's between the treble strings and the bass. I've said this on other videos too, but what I want to see, if I can give you a quiz, competition, see if you can actually manage to do that without looking at where the break point is. So we're going back to the keys, and we're going to play through the break point and see if you can detect where the sound changes. We've gone past it, I'll go back again. Now, did you detect that? That's it. But there's no noticeable difference at all, as you can hear. We'll compare that to a Steinway. There's the break point. Now that of itself obviously isn't the only important thing on a piano, but it does show you that the manufacturer's trying to get the best quality possible. Here's a 1922 piano restored by Steinway, Model O, same length roughly. There's the break point. Sorry, there's the break point. And there's a clear difference. That Steinway was restored in 1963. This is one that's just been restored. And there's a clear difference. Of course, it's not the only important thing in a piano, but I wanted to show you how wonderful Richard Lipp pianos are. Here's a Petrov. Even more obvious. It's a well-made piano generally, but the very fine quality of the Lipp shines out. So back to the Lipp. Just a magnificent break point. Now the tone generally up the piano is slightly flat, and we just got it into stock and out of tune. It's actually 3 beats flat roughly, so it's just gone down equally roughly. Sign of a good piano. It's gone out of tune, just slightly flattened, and good right up to the top treble. An important point about what to do with your piano is to assess the tightness of the pins. We've said this many times before, and they're rock solid. They're very, very tight, so it's been a good restringing job. Now there's several regulation issues on the action, so while the acoustic side's really very, very good on this piano, the regulation needs work. That's key dip, and that's going down far too far. Usually you find that key dip's a bit on the shallow side. In this case, it's much too deep, probably 1.5 millimeters. That's an 11 millimeter key dip. That's the maximum that we want it to be, really. 10.5, 11 is standard, and keyboards tend to be 11, so I often set them at 11. But that looks like 12.5 on that one, and generally standard there. And the sharps are disappearing below the naturals, and that's not correct either. You shouldn't really be able to feel your fingers on there. You do want the sharps to go down far enough so there's a nice aftertouch though. Now the reason why the key dip's been set so low is because the hammer blow distance here is too great. It's that much too great. You can see I've lifted them up to, that's 47 millimeters. That's the normal. It can vary slightly from piano to piano, but the hammer, how far the hammer needs to go to travel to hit the string, you need more key dip if your hammer blow is too great. And they're resting on this rail. They shouldn't be resting on the rail. Now there's an important point here, which is, as technicians will know, if they're resting on the rail, then the spring doesn't need to operate so well. But if they're above the rail, then that spring needs to operate. Let me try and explain. So that one there, the spring doesn't operate. I haven't regulated that. If you lift it above the rail and the spring isn't working, then it won't play the second time. Now this one here I've regulated so that if we now get the back check out of operation, you can see it's going up gently. Not too fast, but gently, not too slow. If we're going to sell the piano, we want to make sure it stays working for a long time. So I want it to be reasonably strong, but not too strong. And those two I've regulated, as you can see. The one next to it isn't regulated. So if we regulate, and I'll show you actually what happens. So I've roughly regulated the hammer height on this one, so it sits now above the rail. So as we play it, and the spring's not working. So as we let it down, it goes right down to the rail. We try and play it a second time, and the jack doesn't go under. So if you watch the jack here, it's not going to go under because the spring isn't taking it back under. So let's go down too far. The jack's not going under. It does go under when we've played it once, as you can see, but that's the problem. So you don't get the repetition. This one, the spring's been regulated. I haven't taken the hammer up yet. I'll do that so you can see the difference. So I've taken the hammer up to roughly the right height, and as we release it, you see the jack going under. If you watch this jack here, it's going under, the spring's allowing it to go under, so the spring's pulling it back. There we go, it goes under and it'll repeat. So on the other one, if you watch it, the jack doesn't go under, doesn't repeat. There we are. And on this one, this is correct. As we release it, hammer goes up, spring operates, jack goes underneath, it can repeat. That's a wonderful repetition lever on a Richard Lipp, by the way. Many in the trade, and especially Richard Lipp specialists, just think that that's one of the very best action design, better than a normal repetition lever. I certainly concur with that. I've had Richard Lipp pianos in my house for most of my piano playing life because I like them so much. Just to finish off with, these are very high quality hammers, done in 1993, not been used hardly since then, very, very little wear, played in, shall we say, and they just do sound magnificent. So we don't need to change those hammers, that's fortunate. Possibly we're thinking about whether we change the roller here or not, but it's quite smooth. I think we definitely need to lubricate. We need to put some chalk lubricant on some French chalk lubricant on it as well. But the important thing as well, do we need to change the shank, which we would normally do, but in this case the hinges are very tight. These hinges here are tight and equally tight, so that's very good news. I nearly forgot to mention an important point. You see the coloration on here. If you're a technician, you've experienced this before, you'll know exactly what that is. And what's happening is the hammers are actually touching and catching the frame here. On this piano, there's very little leeway between the hammers touching the frame and the keys catching the dampers at the back, which you won't be able to see very well here. So we're going to have to be just to be cautious, take some of the hammer off here. It's very common when a piano's got new hammers on, they're obviously slightly thicker, slightly broader here. So shaving off the hammer here is the answer, but also we need to see if the action's set the right distance back. I'm going to try and show you how the hammer touches the frame here. This is quite common on many top makes actually, as well as lesser makes. So the hammer's there, they're not touching the frame, but as I play up at the same volume, you notice that, see, that one's softer because it's just catching the frame, can you see? And there it's just catching the frame as well. There it's just catching the frame. If you push the action in, it won't catch the frame, but then we've got a problem with the back of the keys touching the dampers. So we will have to take some of the hammer off there, just a small amount, stop it catching the frame. If I push it in, push the action in, it won't catch the frame, but one or two of the keys catch the dampers. There's too little leeway. In fact, that one there is catching the dampers. So there's work to do there. So that's a Richard Lipp grand piano, 176 centimetres, 5'9" long, and very fine piano indeed. It just sings. The touch is excellent, even though it needs a lot of regulation. It feels good already. It's also very powerful, and yet you can play very softly as well. The action is one of the very best. I put them up with Steinway and Bösendorfer, definitely, as some of the most best made pianos. Wherever you play it, the touch and the tone are even. The touch will be much better when we've regulated as well. And certainly a musician's piano, there's nothing that surpasses it for this length of piano, really. So I'm really thrilled to get it into stock. Unfortunately, there aren't enough of them of this length. There's quite a lot of the 5-foot Lipps, which obviously the shorter piano is still very well made. But at this length, there aren't any. Partly Percy Granger was a fan of them and imported lots of them into Australia. So I often get messages from Australia asking me about Lipps. And in fact, there's a restorer I know who actually imports them from Australia to the UK to restore them. Thank you very much for listening.